Okay, everybody, welcome to Taking Our Freight Artists Movements podcast. We're really excited today. We're here with Anna Reiner. And Anna, introduce yourself,
Okay,
please.
I will do that. Thanks, Lisa. So I'm Anna Rayner, if you don't mind.
Reiner.
It's all right. And I
Okay.
always said rain or shine is one way you can
Oh,
remember
I
it.
like that.
Yeah, but anyway, Anna Rayner, and I've been an art therapist and an art teacher and a teacher of various other types of content. I used to be an English teacher. I love art and language together. But anyway, I've worked in human services all my life. In many capacities, but art has always been the common thread. And I really enormously value the impact of art on well-being, on mental health, social, emotional health, and on how art can connect people to each other, how we can connect to our real self. It helps us sort of engage and activate our authentic self. But I think in this day and age now, when we're all feeling very isolated, especially after the COVID lockdown pandemic, but also just modern society, we're so hooked on our screens and our to-do list because life is so overstimulating, things that we got to do, got to get done, got to get done. And sometimes we forget the value of making authentic connections with other people. And sometimes people we know, and sometimes new people, if we go to some kind of art gathering and we're around people we've never met before, um, simple art activities can help us feel seen. And that's what I think we all desperately want. We want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged and valued and in an authentic way. And art really enables us to do that. So
Yeah.
my business is I have a business that I've been a trainer for many, many years, decades. I say between 35 and 40 years as an educator myself, who then became a therapist, which I think is not uncommon when people who are interested in education or social sciences of any type, oftentimes they're also interested in therapy. I was one of those people. So art was my key interest. Then I loved working with people, so worked with children and adults, and I think I always loved that connection. So I loved being creative, and I loved the connection.
Mm.
You know, a lot of artists who are fine artists, studio artists, work in isolation because in some ways that's just the life of an artist. It's you're going deeply into your own form of expression and creation. But and I tried that when I was younger, but I was lonely. I missed the connection. I'm a social. I guess I have that little bit of extroversion in me who just craves, a connection. And so I found that art therapy and art education was a way to be creative and also connect. So, so I don't know if you wanted to ask me any other questions, but I can just go and talk about. Oh, you
Yeah. Well,
endless.
yeah, I love that. Thank you for introducing yourself. And I love everything you've mentioned so far. Yeah, we usually use a question as a jumping off point for a conversation. And then we just where it goes. It's been working out for several years now. So,
Good, good, good. Yeah,
um,
well,
yeah.
you've been at it for a
Um,
long time, and yeah, I'm glad you have a
yeah.
good following and a growing following.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you what happens when groups gather and make art. I mean, it's a great jumping off point from what you mentioned about the creativity and connection. So what have you noticed that happens when you do get groups together and they gather and they make art together? What happens?
Well, art is like the secret sauce to connection. And in groups, especially when people don't know each other or don't know each other well. And I say that because I do now, and for the last 5 years, I have worked as a teacher trainer for teachers who come together for their professional development needs because they work in school districts or they work in Head Start agencies or they work with children, but they have once or twice a year, all the classrooms will stop and they'll have professional development days. So
Mm.
depending on your school district, you'll have one day or 2 days or sometimes a whole week. Uh, I know I live in Los Angeles, and the school districts here will close, for up almost a week, I think, before school starts, and that's when they bring trainers in. And I have a business that uses art to show those teachers how to be better teachers, more effective teachers, and how to address the social emotional needs of the children that they're teaching. So we assume in education, especially working with younger children, and I'm talking about preschool through early elementary. Early childhood is defined up until age 8. So it's first, second, and third grade and preschool. That's when children's minds are developing at their fastest rate, and they do a lot of hands-on learning to accelerate the growth of their neurons and their brain pathways, and their foundational brain capacity gets determined in those early years. So I work with teachers who work with those children. And so I have groups of teachers, sometimes as many as 250 at a time. I did recently. More often with 25 or 50 at a time. And I do a lot of different trainings, but I'm always using art materials as a part of the training. So now I do a lot of creativity and connection workshops. One that is very popular is just called Renew Your Passion. And it's art for the teachers themselves or the caregivers, because not everybody's a teacher, but many people work in a nurturing position, whether they are social workers or teachers, or there's so many, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a firefighter, there's so many what you would call service professions where you're helping other people and working with other people. And those are people in that field. Those of us who are educators or therapists have a lot of stress, because we have the secondary stress of the people we're working with to help them get out through their stress. We have our own collective stress, and that's a recognized. It's kind of a form of a mild. It's not necessarily mild, but it's a generalized form of PTSD. What happens? It's care for the caregiver, and teachers. A lot of times people don't realize teachers are caregivers. They're educating, but they're also dealing with children's social emotional foundation, how I feel about myself, how I relate to others, how does the world see me? Do I fit in the world? Do I have a place? And so given that teachers often get burned out, especially after the COVID pandemic, when everybody's nerves are kind of fried, because of the pandemic overload of trauma. Teachers are desperate to make connections and get in touch with their own creativity. So getting back to your question, Lauren, what do I see when I do those workshops? I see these sparks starting to fire, not in the beginning, because if you give most adults a piece of blank paper and stuff to play with, they're like, I can't draw, I'm not an artist. They're like, why did I sign up for this? Or why did my manager make me go to this? I hate art. I was never good at it. Or, something we've heard it all.
Yes.
In fact, so often it's like a broken record. People will come into the training. I'll have everything set up with some nice inviting, very express, like the things you see behind me. I'm not doing what most people think of as art. I'm doing lines, shapes, and colors. I'm doing the things that art therapists do. It's like, let's just do it and not think about it.
Right.
And so people come in, and it's so often people say, just like they see me setting up and they say, oh, I'm not an artist. I can't draw. And like just to warn you, this is not my thing. And then oftentimes after the end of the hour or 2 hours, depending on, how long the workshop is, those same people will say, this was more fun than I thought it would be. And that's when I know that, okay, I've done my job to help open up people's attitudes about their own ability to enjoy this. And then on a point that I think is so important to make is the connections, and how when people are loosening up, and I'm doing a lot of those loosening up with liquid watercolor, loosen up with, doodling, scribbling, getting a lot of motion in there. I always say the more of your body you get involved, the better, because you want to get out of your head. And you see people starting to relax and connect and enjoy just talking with each other in a relaxed fashion. You see there's so much that happens, and it's not, art is not what people think it is. And these workshops help them realize that.
I love that. What comes up for me is an understanding and empathy. When you were talking about like teachers as caregivers or people that are in the service industry where they're absorbing other people's energy and they don't know it. So do you feel that art helps you understand and it's empathy towards yourself as well, right? Kind
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a metaphor, say, just because of this thing happens to be behind me on the
Right.
wall. This is just swirls of color that have been sprayed through a spray bottle. So it's liquid paint, it's literally liquid watercolor, and a big, I think it's a 4x8 paint tube, right?
Hmm.
And so it's a very loose thing that I'm spraying and swirling some drizzles on top. So if I do a smaller version of those with a group of 50 people or 250 people, um, excuse me, where everybody's, we're doing those kinds of things on a more reduced size, or perhaps they're standing around with a group of 4 or 6 people doing it on a larger size as a group activity. Um, in either of those cases, you see how even though you're using the same simple materials, everybody expresses themselves differently. And so it's that metaphor that we all have our own way of looking at things.
Hmm.
And that helps you, see how, there's many different ways to solve a problem. Um, we're even though we're working with the same material, so like we're all so similar but we're also different at the same time. I always love this one saying, you might have heard of it, but it's kind of silly, but it's so simple and so true. It's like, you don't ever forget that you are your own unique person. Nobody in the world is just like you, and so you have qualities that are so just personal to you, just like everyone else does.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, we're so unique, but we're so like everyone else at the same time. It's like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
so puzzling, but
I,
it's true.
it is.
And
I think, yeah, what I like about this is that, it's almost as though in the very same moment people are um, sort of learning self-expression or getting the opportunity to self-express while also gaining perspective about other people not being like them in every way, right? So you're building community and connection, but also allowing someone else to be part of that community without judgment in a way, because a lot of your daily interactions with people aren't necessarily welcoming because unfortunately we live in a society that pushes being super busy and having to go everywhere, and everyone feels rushed, and then they're viewing themselves as the center of the universe. So when someone else does something, it's like they're impacting them as opposed to like, we're all in this together. And what I'm hearing is that when people make art together, and I know Lisa and I have witnessed this anytime we've had art, especially an art break day, but you watch sort of that part of people sort of drop off their bodies, right? The sort of the walls that you build up almost to quote unquote survive your day, are dismantled when you are sitting. And I don't know if it's like, is it because you're kind of doing something you don't normally do? Because a lot of people we get at our break day tables, some of them are super excited and they know
Hmm.
us and they want to come and do it. And they can't believe it's happening in a public space. But
yeah,
a lot of people are hesitant, right? Like what you described. They're like, nope, I'm not going to do this. And the reason they do it is because a friend makes them do it, right? Or their boss, like you suggested. Um, and then all of a sudden you watch it. I mean, you can predict at this point, because we've done it so many years and so have you. You can see the person and you know what sort of art making personality they have, and it's so fun to watch that get dismantled in a short period of time.
yeah, and it is pretty quick. It is pretty quick if you are trained in how to facilitate that process, which is, what a lot of people, if you're an art therapist, you recognize that a lot of people have no idea really what an art. People don't understand art and they don't understand therapy. And put
Right.
those together, unless you've been an artist or experienced the art process, or been in therapy or trained as a therapist, you have no idea really what those are. And that's most people.
Right.
Most people think you go to therapy and they give you the answers. They tell you what to do.
Right.
And art is something that you work till it looks great, and then you try to sell it to a gallery.
Right.
So yeah, you put those together, and yet as an art therapist, we're trained to do just what we're talking about: help people get out of their heads, um, out of their critical selves, and just experience the process of discovering what happens when you lay down some color. And you do this and you do that, and you don't think about it ahead. You see people say, "I have no idea what to do." Well, that's the perfect place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. You were talking before off camera, we were talking about research. Do you have any like research? Because for me, like we're talking about, because we've seen it, I've seen it so many times. I always say it's when the head goes down. There's something when people, you know what I mean, you're creating and everybody's like, they're in, but then they're out, they're in and out. They're like,
Well,
is it any
it's like,
research? Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say it's because it's not direct. I talk to my kids about this all the time. I have a
Mm,
kiddo struggles with eye contact, because
mm,
and we talk about it a lot. And it's because it's intimidating, and for him, it's almost like a flip flop of intimidation. It's because he's very good at reading people and he almost like knows right away what's going on with the person. And it's a really big emotional roller coaster for him. And so making art for him is a really nice way to connect with people. He sits next to his best friend and they read books together. And it's
mm,
because they can be together and they can talk, but it's not this like direct talking. And I think that is one of the powers of the art table is that, right, like you said, your head is down, right?
mhm,
But
mhm,
it's almost like you have an indirect and direct connection with someone, but
mhm,
you can talk about stuff because you're not necessarily feeling as though you're the center of the stage, right? And for some people, having a light, shining on them is what kind of makes them freeze, and who we could call it a trauma response, we could call it a personality trait, who knows what
mhm.
it is, but art kind of, I think when you're in the making process of art, not the showing process of art, the showing process of the art is definitely like, here I am, everybody. And that takes a certain kind of personality to do that. And that's great. I mean, I've done it before, it's fun. But it's super intimidating. But when you're in the middle of creating, right, I feel like it's this direct and indirect at the same time. And I think that's what you're talking about, right, Lisa? It's like this
Yeah.
dance. And so you're not so scared, maybe.
Yeah, there's something, and there's something about like the what happens to the brain waves. Anna, if you know any research that could kind of uncover
Yes.
that.
Well, there has been some research on cortisol and serotonin and dopamine, those kind of things. So
Hmm.
you take the stress hormone cortisol. I don't know a lot about all the neurological, it's hormonal, neurological, but I do know some because I wrote a book that just came out a year ago, Trauma Informed Art Activities for Early Childhood, and I had to do a lot of research. Um, because I wrote it with a publisher and I wanted it to be a textbook for university ready. I wanted it to be, it was all the big biography or
Hmm.
bibliography, and everything was had to be very well researched, put it that way. So so there have been some studies. There's MIT of all places, MIT, which is known as such a engineering and super think tank hub of left brain analytic thinking, from the
Hmm.
STEM research. But they do a lot of art and creativity research at MIT and other top universities. But MIT is a hub, and there's been a research coming out of there and other places about cortisol levels decreasing, which is the stress hormone, and that's one that seems to be easily measurable after, say, an hour of sustained, art activity. And I think art therapists are always trying to get more and more research on board so that they can be recognized in the world of mental health as more
Hmm.
viable. Because there still is the question from, the lay, the lay public and even professionals, like, what does art really have to do with any of this? It's so part of that not being understood. But because art is thought of as a thing. It's really a process, it's an experience. It's creativity and letting go of boundaries and being vulnerable and opening up. And then you play with paint and lines and colors, and that documents your experience. So it's not art as a decoration, it's art as an experience. And that's something that if you don't recognize that, then it makes no sense why art would have anything to do with, cortisol levels.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is there have been studies about like even going to a museum, like you don't even have to, and that
Even
that
looking
leans
at
on
art, yes.
yeah,
I've
that
seen some
and
of
that leans on the fact of it being an experience, right? Because going to a museum is an art experience, right? And so, right, it was like 45 minutes of art, what viewing, decreased stress hormone cortisol. And so I think that but that also you have to be in the category of understanding that art isn't just something that you are viewing, as you said, like from your head. You are experiencing it, right? Mind, body, spirit, all of it at the same moment, right? And I think that I mean, it's always interesting to me to talk about the why. Why does spraying colored water on a canvas, why does it do that? I mean, and maybe that's just a way philosophical question that we can't answer, it just does. I don't really know,
Well, when you think about early childhood, which is kind of it became my area of expertise over the years, which didn't start that way because when I studied art therapy, when you become an art therapist, it's a grad school experience, usually 2 years, right? And I know where I went the first year, they expose you to child art therapy, adult art therapy, couples, group art therapy, all the ways that you could practice, right? Which is with any mental health practice. There's all those different audiences that you could, work with. But I chose adult art therapy because I had been a teacher already, and I thought I just was ready to switch it up and do something different. So I really started my career as an art therapist working in inpatient mental health and community settings for adults. But then, as so many careers kind of morph over time, I ended up focusing on the early years, which I really enjoy, especially because I had 2 children. And it's really fun when you study art and work with your own children in art. I mean, it's amazing. And but anyway, when you study the early child development, so much of it is the sensory, before our thought processes, our left brain kicks in, it's all about sensory interactions with the environment. And children, the brain develops through movement and sensory interactions. That's how, so I see those sensory play, messy art, all as part of that sort of biological, that reptile brain. It's like, it really can't, unless you're on the spectrum or have sensory, deprivation or sensory, whatever that term is, where it freaks you out to have super sensory stimulation because you're already overstimulated, right? Unless that has happened to you, or you were born with that issue. Normally, sensory stimulation involves all the pleasures of life. When you think eating or having eat a sunset, having the wind blow through your hair, they say riding a bicycle or skiing, scuba diving, all the things that involve, the using your body and feeling your senses. That's where so much of the pleasure principle of life lies. And that's where art can come in, but people think, oh, I'm going to make my house is going to be a mess. How am I going to clean it up? I have no idea what paint to buy. It's amazing how people don't even know what paint. I have people ask me that the questions that for an art person sound like so simple. Like I have somebody recently, my daughter's friend had bought a surfboard, an old surfboard at a thrift shop or something that she wanted to paint, not to use the surfboard. It was very old. And she said, ask your mom what kind of paint. She said, I've got some liquid water. I've got some, watercolor strips around. It's like, I forget how people have no idea what tempera paint is, or watercolor, or acrylic, or whatever.
Right.
Why would I use acrylic? They have no idea because why would they? You know, it was never their thing.
Right. Wouldn't it be nice though if we lived in a world where that was just like part of
Yeah.
our society, like eating an apple? You just knew, right? Like this is paint. And yeah.
What I love what you're talking about is creativity is almost like epicurious, meaning it is sensory. I don't think people look at it as that. I think what you keep alluding to is like art. It's in a museum. I can't do it. You know what I mean? It's so there seems like a separation. But Lauren, you just said it. What if art is like eating an apple? It's that sensation. It's epicurious. It's like that's what life is. It makes life more colorful, more beautiful. You
Yeah, who
know,
doesn't love a sunset? I mean, you know,
right?
maybe some people don't. I haven't met that person yet.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And right. It's because it's this, yeah, it's this way of getting in tune with, right. And we talked about this before. It's like
Mhm.
it's your connection with how you're alive, right? So
Mhm.
if you're experiencing all your senses in one moment, it's sort of like what connects you with life, and then perhaps with the life around you. And maybe that's why when people make art together, right, it's almost as though you're experiencing being alive as a person, but also as like a community.
Yeah.
It's that reminder that we are all connected. You know, we are all in this together, and sometimes certain things may make us feel like we're not. Certain structures and the way that society is created or talked about or things like that. But you know, when you take that moment, you press that pause button and you open up. You know, it's that reminder that almost like you matter, but we matter on a grander, you know, context. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. It's like it's like I see you. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's almost like that. And then
I
Yeah.
what
see
you
you,
create.
I hear you, and what you say matters to me. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's one of those old
Yeah.
bottom line elements. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that is right. I mean, and if there's anything we need right now, you know, I think that's what we need. We need people to feel as though they're worthy of being seen and they're worthy of being heard, and that you know, what you have to say does matter, you know, and that uh you know, maybe gathering together to express those feelings and those thoughts and things like that might, well, we know, the three of us know that we would end up with a positive outcome, you know. It's just getting the people in the room, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's getting them to realize there's something in it for them. And I think, you know, little by little, I know when I see these groups of teachers, you know, I know that that's going to have a ripple effect because so many
Mhm.
of them, you know, do say, "Oh, this was more fun than I thought," and
Right.
you know that the next time something comes around, they're going to be just a little more open to it because they're
Yeah.
gonna say, that actually wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really success. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that because, like, in our previous conversation, we were talking about how important the conversation is, you know, and right, it's like first you kind of talk about it, and people, like you were saying, people just some people don't even know what art is, right? That's what we've been talking about, that the whole time, where they have art in this one category,
Mhm.
and the category is I can't do it. Right. So then if we keep telling people, we keep talking about it, well, you don't have to do it in that way, but you can do it in this way, and just sort of introducing them mentally to the concept of it, right? That's a good first step. And then the second step is getting them into the room and to sit down at the table. And then once they do that, most people, uh, you know, will try it again. You know, and so I love that. I love the idea of just like, even just being out there, even the people that maybe walk by when you're doing something and they aren't doing it, but at least the fact that it's there opens them up a little bit more to the notion of maybe doing it at a later date, you know. So yeah, I mean, to me it's like blowing a trumpet, like keep doing it, everyone.
Yeah.
keep offering it. You know, the world needs it.
Definitely.
For me, what comes up for me, it's like art as medicine, and it works in different ways. It doesn't work like you don't have to draw the apple like an apple for it to work. Do you know what I mean? On your
Yeah.
psyche, on your physical being, on your hormones, on whatever. You can do it. You can just do the color. You can, you know what I mean? So that's so non-intimidating, you know?
Yeah.
You can just
Yeah.
throw colors on canvas and boom, you know, you're feeling better. So wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
Anna, yeah, I was just gonna say, tell people how they can, you know, connect with you and your offerings, and I mean, you're doing beautiful work. So
Thank you. Thank you. It's fun to be here, and I've followed you for so many years,
yeah,
and I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. So my business is Creative Play LA, and it's LA because I'm in Los Angeles. And there was a time that before I ever did virtual trainings with art, I never thought I would do virtual trainings with art or all these podcast things. And, you know, so much is available after COVID, and we became so facile with Zoom and all the other platforms, Teams and all that stuff. So I used to just do trainings in California, where I've lived for 40 years. And I'm well networked within the education market here in California. So a lot of people have heard my name because for decades, I've been doing art workshops at conferences for educators in California. And so my name, Anna Rayner, I always like to think I'm a big fish in a small pool of people who work in early education have probably heard, they maybe don't know my name, but they think she's that art person. And we're going to do some hands-on art. If we go to her workshop, we're not going to talk about art or look at slides. We're going to make art. And so I'm pretty well known in California in this market as just my name. So if you Google my name, you'll find a bunch of stuff up there. But I do have a website that I've worked hard on. It's very colorful, and I have a lot of handouts. I have 3 ebooks that are free, and including one that I love. I got to say, you know, to toot my own horn, it's called The Healing Power of Art or something like that. Anyway, I made it into ebook, and it's art therapy condensed with colors. And I made it on Canva, and then I had it professionally made into an ebook, and you can download it for free. I think it's called How Art Heals Us. That's it.
Nice.
Art Heals Us. It's my favorite. And then I
Nice.
wrote a book that was published on trauma-informed art for early childhood, which is also on there. But you can just look up Creative Play LA, and you'll find me there.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been fun.
Yes.